Okay, couple more commands here. The rectangle command right here. The default is two points. Okay, and you've got some options to where you could rotate it or you could fillet it as you're working through that. If you hit the pull down on that, you go to the polygon command, and we'll come to that in just a minute. So we'll go rectangle, and it's asking you for the first corner point. Okay, and you see in the command line you've got these options: chamfer, elevation, fillet thickness, width, those kinds of things. Okay, so width would be well, let's just work through them. Okay. So first point, I'm just going to tell it absolute 2, enter. And now these distances are relative. And so you notice it depends on what direction that I'm moving my mouse as to what what it's asking me. But these are going to be relative commands, relative distances. So I'm going to come here, I don't know, I'll say 5 and then hit the tab key. Ooh, maybe I don't want to do 5. I will go ahead with it. And we'll say 4, enter. Okay, and so now that made me a rectangle that's 5 units long and 4 units tall. Okay, and it creates it as a polyline. Okay, so let's go back into that again. And I wanna hit C for chamfer. And first chamfer distance, and you'll do this, but it's going to be in your book and it'll give you the settings you want to use. And so I'm going to say my first chamfer distance, I'm going to say 0.25, enter. Second chamfer distance, we'll keep it at 0.25. And now my first corner point, I'm going to say 2, 2. Oop, I hit plus, comma, 2, enter. And the other corner point, let's keep it simple at 3, tab 1.5, enter. And you see a chamfer is an angled clip off of the corner of an object. Okay, and so that's how the chamfer within the rectangle works. And so let's start that again. And let's do fillet this time. And a fillet radius, you would type in whatever your radius is. We'll leave it at 0.25. First corner, I'm going to say 2, 6, enter. And now there's my length. I'm going to say 3, tab 1.5. And you see it puts a rounded, in place of the right angle corners, it puts a round or an arc. That's a fillet. Okay, and so those are the main things that you're going to deal with if you're dealing with a rectangle. Now the other option is a polygon, and this is for drawing any number of sides of an object. Okay, 4 you end up with a square, 3 you get a triangle, 5 you get a pentagon, 6 you get a hexagon, like that. So I'm going to tell it 5 for a hexagon, or for a pentagon. And now it's asking me for the center of it. And well, I'm going to say 9, enter. Now it's asking me inscribe it in a circle or circumscribed about a circle. And if you look at the information in the textbook, it has an example of that. Inscribed means that the points of the polygon are touching the circle of whatever radius that you're dealing with. Circumscribed means the flats of the polygon are touching the circle. Okay, and so we'll go with inscribed in a circle. And now it asks you for a radius, and we'll just leave that at 3. Okay. Okay, so let's do that. Well, I guess we really should put a circle around this thing, and I'll do a 3-point circle so you can kind of see how a 3-point circle works. Okay, and we'll deal with circles again in a moment. So let's go to polygon again. Number of sides 5, center 9, 9, but I want to go circumscribed, and then the radius was a 3. So now you can see when I inscribe, the points are touching the circle for whatever the radius of it is. When I circumscribe, it's the flats that are touching it. And you're not going to see very many pentagons in your drawings. What you will see is hexagons, mainly. So let's do that again. Hexagon will be 6 sides. Center, I'm going to go center of that circle. Inscribe, and I can, I can click to the circle if I get an object snap on the circle, or I can type in the radius of the circle. Either way. And so now you can see how the points of that are touching. So let's start that again. 6 sides, specify the center, circumscribed, and now you can see how that would work. Because often with hexagons and octagons, you'll be given a dimension of either the distance across the flats, like so, or you'll be given a distance, that won't work here, okay? A distance across the points, okay? Most often it'll be a distance across the flats. Not always, but most often. And so depending upon how it's dimensioned are you going to use inscribed or circumscribed? If it's dimensioned across the flats, like this one, then you use circumscribed. If it's dimensioned across the points, and maybe that's not a good example, let's do this one here. If it's dimensioned across the points, then you inscribe. Okay, and so that's rectangles, polygons, that covers a lot of that kind of stuff. So let's look at circles now. Now, if you just start the circle command, which on the toolbar would be right here, the default is radius, okay? And when you first open AutoCAD, unless you've used the circle command, the default is going to be a radius. But most circles are dimensioned with a diameter. Okay, and so the first thing you do is you pick the center point, and you can see here now it's asking for the radius, and I can type in the radius that I want. Down in the command line, you have the option to change over to diameter. You just press D on the keyboard and then enter, and then you type in whatever your diameter is. And so we'll come in here, let's say a radius of 2, and if I start that command again, pick a center point. Now let's say I want to do diameter, so I hit D on the keyboard, diameter, and I'm going to tell it 2. You've got to be careful with this because a lot of people will start the command and type in the diameter for the radius. And so you end up with your circle being 2 times too big. Okay. Now some of the other options here, 2-point circle, 3-point circle. You saw me use those, the 3-point circle a while ago when I drew the circle around the pentagon. The 2-point works the same way. It just so happens that the 2 points are going to be the diameter of the circle. You just pick 2 known points and it will create the circle to whatever size you want. Now tangent, radius and tan work a little bit different. So let me put in a couple of lines here. Okay. So if I go tangent, radius, and this would be like creating something like a fillet. And so I pick that line, and then I pick this line, and now I tell it a radius, and I'm going to guess something big, so I'm going to say a radius of 3. Okay, and then it will draw the circle tangent to those 2 lines, but at the correct radius. So let's do that again, but with a smaller radius. Let's say 2. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. Okay, and depending on what you're doing, you would draw this. If you're trying to get a tangent arc in here, then you would trim out your lines that you wouldn't need, and you trim out your circle. Okay, so the tangent is when you want a circle that's drawn between 3 lines that are tangent to all 3 lines. Okay, now you can notice it doesn't touch this line, but that circle is still tangent to that line. And if it needed to be across there, we could extend that line on over until it meets. Okay, now let's look at arcs. The pull down, the default arc is 3 points, where you just click 3 points and it draws an arc. You don't have any control over the radius when you're doing this one. You just pick 3 points and it draws an arc. One of the problems with the arc command is by default, drop my book. If you're going left to right, you create a bowl or a downward arc. If you're going right to left, you create a dome or an upward arc. That's by default. You can change the direction by pressing the control key in the middle of your command, and it will change that. But we'll say arc here, and it's asking you for the start point, and then it's asking you for the second point, and then it's asking you for the third point. Okay, so I went left to right. Well, it didn't create the bowl because I specified the point, so the direction thing doesn't work on a 3-point arc. But if I hit my pull down over here, I can see all these different options for drawing arcs. And usually you're going to end up with a start-end radius. You may end up with some center starts and angles and things like that, but usually you're going to have a radius. Okay, and so let's say this will be my start point, this will be my end point, and now it's asking me for my radius. Okay, and so let's say a radius of 16. Okay, now let's do that command again and go from right to left. What happened? End point. There we go. And then a radius. Okay. If you're in the middle of the command, when it's time to type in the radius, if you read your command line, it'll tell you hold down control to switch directions. So you hold down your control key and then type in, it didn't work. So I drag my mouse down. If I hold down my control key, oh, it's not working from typing it in. That's what's happening. Huh, weird. So let's do it again. Arc. Control, I just need to drag my mouse in the other direction. And now I can type in my distance. It still didn't work. Arcs are confusing. Personally, I find it easier to draw a circle and then trim the circle. Okay, you're just gonna have to play around with these. There are some exercises in the book for you to do, for you to play with. Try out some of the different options. But in all honesty, most of the time I draw a circle and then trim that circle.